Welcome to this month's edition of Okaloosa Eye on Crime. I'm Nicole Wagner.
And I'm Michelle Nicholson.
And local law enforcement agencies are working to solve crimes in our community, and many times it's the information citizens send in that crack the case. Now, through Emerald Coast Crime Stoppers, you can send in tips via the web, text tip, or by phone, all anonymous, and provide that vital information.
This month, some of the crimes we want to profile and get your help on include a murder that's nearly a year old, 2 back-to-back armed robberies, and a rash of church burglaries that's been happening up in the north end of the county. So let's get started.
Yeah, and first up is that year-old homicide investigation. The sheriff's office is asking for information regarding the shooting death of a Fort Walton Beach man inside his apartment back on April 27th of last year. A 32-year-old Paris Quentin Matthews was shot once around midnight at Renee Lynn Apartments on Woodham Street there in Fort Walton Beach. Now, this happened when 2 men knocked on the door, came in. The suspects described as black males who were wearing hoodies and had their lower faces covered. So anybody with information, please contact 863-TIPS. Of course, you can go to the web, emeraldcoastcrimestoppers.com. We'd love to get some information on that older homicide investigation.
Absolutely, certainly like to hear from some folks too on this next case. The sheriff's office is investigating 2 armed robberies that look like they could be the work of the same 2 individuals. The first one took place around 9:20 in the evening. A pizza delivery person for Hungry Howie's was trying to deliver food at a home on Placid Drive when he says a black male holding a rifle came at him from a wooded area across the street, accompanied by a white male with a knife. The black male grabbed the pizza bag and took his cash, and the victim said that both appeared to be somewhere between the ages of 18 and 25. Well, within about 30 minutes of that report, the OCSO learned a black male armed with a rifle and a white male robbed the Subway restaurant at 231 Racetrack Road. Both were wearing black ski masks in that robbery. The clerk says the black male pointed the rifle at him and demanded money, then took some cash, and they both left. He says the man was wearing a black long-sleeve shirt or jacket and black jeans. Described the white male as wearing a gray bomber-style jacket. Of course, you can see in the video what they're wearing. Black fabric that is on the shoulders and black jeans, and along with some white Nike tennis shoes with the black swoosh on them. So we got some video, get you a look at them, but of course their faces are covered, so it's difficult. But if someone knows the way they walk or recognizes that jacket, certainly could be a clue.
That's right. Next up, we're trying to identify a Destin Hotel armed burglary suspect. The sheriff's office is trying to track down a man that attempted to burglarize a room on the Holiday Inn Express in Destin, then pulled a gun on a witness. Now, this happened back on December 16th at about 5:45 in the afternoon. A white male seen attempting to gain entry into a room by using a screwdriver to pry open the door. When he was confronted, he pulled out a handgun and pointed it at the witness. Now, he then fled in a silver or gold 4-door sedan, possibly a Buick or Ford Taurus, keeping the gun pointed at the witness the whole time. So very scary. He's described as a white male between 45 and 59 years old. Medium build, about 6 foot tall. He was wearing a green jacket, a dark colored hat, and what appeared to be prescription glasses. And take a look at that vehicle in the picture. If you recognize that vehicle, give us a call. Completely anonymous.
Looking for another vehicle as well. This one's stolen. The Fort Walton Beach Police Department's trying to find a car that was stolen from the parking lot of Pizza Hut on Miracle Strip Parkway. The stolen vehicle is a 2011 Mitsubishi Galant. It's 4-door, black in color, and here's the tag. If it still has the tag on it, it's N266GG. All the windows and the windshield visor are tinted, and the rear passenger wheel is missing the Mitsubishi emblem. So if you've got information on that, the Fort Walton Beach Police Department would certainly like to hear from you.
And we're trying to get some information in a rash of North Okaloosa church burglaries recently. Both the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office and the Crestview Police Department are actually investigating 4 church burglaries in the North End since January 20th. Now, the most recent one happened at the Palm Chapel Primitive Baptist Church on Cadle Drive there in Crestview overnight sometime on February 13th. The first burglary took place at the Pilgrim's Rest Baptist Church in Baker, where the thieves damaged the church and stole a small amount of cash. And deputies were then called to First United Methodist Church of Baker 2 days later after a church member arrived there on January 22nd and discovered a window unit air conditioner hanging outside the open window. Inside, they found evidence of forced entry into the church office. Now, the third one was reported at Antioch Baptist Church there on Antioch Road in Crestview. A church member found evidence of a break-in that took place sometime between the evening hours of February 9th and the early morning hours of February 10th. Only one small item reported missing there, but that's 4 of them. in a little over a month. So anybody with information, give us a call, 863-TIPS.
And you can see from these that these people are breaking into churches, but they're actually not getting
A whole
virtually
lot.
anything. So it's like, what is the point to break into a church and you're taking a small item or getting virtually nothing? Next up, we don't have any pictures on this one, but the Walton County Sheriff's Office is trying to find out who burglarized 2 concession stands. That's at Helen McCall Park over on Mall Drive in Santa Rosa Beach. Deputies got called out by the Baseball Association in South Walton, said that someone had forced entry into 2 concession stands. That was back on January 4th of this year, and they took cash and food items. And they think it happened somewhere between December 15th and the 4th. So if you've got information on that, certainly call Emerald Coast Crime Stoppers or text us.
And next up, the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office is trying to identify this Shalimar burglary suspect. Back on January 9th, shortly before 2 a.m., he entered a residence located on Doral Drive in Shalimar. Now, the victim's surveillance camera captured the subject entering through the open garage door. He then entered the residence and removed a wallet and purse from inside the residence. All this while the homeowners slept. So we're actually in the house, and then he left, of course. But anybody with information, take a good look. That's a pretty good photograph.
It is a good
actually.
photograph.
So if you know who he is, give us a call.
We've got another picture of a suspect. This time, the Crestview Police Department is trying to identify this man who used stolen checks at a location in Alabama in December. So contact us if you have any information on that person.
And we'll keep it going with burglary suspects here. We've got another one. We're trying to identify a burglary that occurred to a business on the Beale Extension there in Fort Walton Beach. This actually was back on November 30th of last year. The victim reported a large amount of equipment missing from his shop, and after reviewing his surveillance camera, he observed this unidentified white male taking items including a forklift battery and military fiber optic cable back on November 29th. Now, he did return again on December 2nd, but that's also a pretty good picture. So if you know who he is, give us a call, 863-TIPS, or the web, emeraldcoastcrimestoppers.com.
And I think you've got this next one as well.
We do. And next up, we're actually happy to report that we're no longer looking for this individual, but a man wanted in connection with an attempted murder and armed robbery in the Fort Walton Beach area back in December has actually been located in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, he was located by the U.S. Marshal Service Fugitive Task Force, and that was thanks to the help of a Crime Stoppers tip. So now he actually was wanted. 19-year-old Michael Venning Jr. of Wright Parkway is accused of shooting 20-year-old Deion Sanders outside a home on Yorktown Circle shortly before 3 a.m. back on December 31st. It happened the way it's supposed to. Somebody called in a tip. They actually knew he was up in South Carolina where he was, went right up, and they ended up in a short foot pursuit with this individual as well. But that just shows you that's how Crime Stoppers works. Another success story for us.
And this is essentially a situation that could have easily have been a murder. The victim, Sanders, was shot 5 times. He got hit 3 times in the upper torso, once in the left leg, once in the right elbow. So lucky for him that he survived this, but thankfully, due to that Crime Stoppers tip, this guy was trying to hide out in South Carolina, and he was not successful. So next up, the Sheriff's Office recently announced its Employees of the Year for 2013, and we want to tell you about the Deputy of the Year who earned that honor with an outstanding work ethic, his professionalism, and what his colleagues called an unrelenting pursuit of justice. So let's hear more about him.
Sheriff now will present our 2013 Deputy of the Year. Deputy Jonathan Schlager, please come forward. Choosing the Deputy of the Year is never an easy task, and this year was no different. The awards committee poured over about 70 pages of nominations of very deserving people. But we think you'll all agree that the person selected this year is extremely deserving. Last year, he responded to 1,698 calls for service and made nearly 90 arrests. His closure rate was 42%, and he logged nearly 340 hours as a shift field trainer this year, training newly hired deputies. Deputy Jonathan Schlager is above average in every way that we measure. He's a leader of his peers, not just in law enforcement, but as an Air Force reservist and a volunteer with Freemason Lodge 172. His work ethic is second to none, and the quality of his work is impressive. Here's just one example. In August, he started working a string of burglaries at a self-storage warehouse in the south end of the county. He identified a suspect, located victims who weren't even aware they'd been victimized yet, and helped gather information that eventually led to the suspect's arrest and the recovery of more than $35,000 worth of stolen property. Ask his coworkers to describe Deputy Schlager, and they'll use words like energetic, focused, proactive, motivated, and persistent, all hallmark traits of a law enforcement officer role model. You can add to those his go-to attitude, concerns for officer safety, and his steady good judgment. Deputy Schlager has developed positive relationships in the community, and he represents the highest standard for a deputy sheriff with this agency. Please join me in congratulating a truly outstanding performer, the 2013 Deputy of the Year, Jonathan Schlager.
And congratulations go out to Deputy Schlager, but he's not the only Sheriff's Office staffer to be awarded for great efforts last year. Now let's take a look at the other high achievers.
Now, the individual accomplishments of each of those 2013 award winners were highlighted on the OCSO Facebook page and through the Twitter account if you wanted to go back and catch those.
And now let's take a look at our first list of wanted fugitives, and they are wanted as of today's taping date, which is February 24th, 2014. And remember, you can earn a cash reward of up to $1,000 for anonymous information that helps lead to an arrest. First up is going to be Casey Lynn Suckup. She's a 28-year-old white female wanted for violation of probation on the original charge of grand theft, last known to live in Freeport.
Also looking for 28-year-old Michael Douglas Hale. He's wanted by the Crestview Police Department for aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. He was last known to live on Corwin Drive in Crestview.
And a new face to the show this month is 28-year-old Michael Madison Matthey, who's wanted for dealing in stolen property and providing false statement of ownership to a pawnbroker last known to live over in Fort Walton Beach.
Daniel Peterson was last known to live on Todd Road in Crestview. He's 30 years old and he's wanted for failure to register as a sexual offender.
23-year-old Jermaine Carl Tape, who's wanted for carrying a concealed weapon, last known to live in Fort Walton Beach.
Okay, Anthony Earl Jackson Jr., we can take him off because he's been located since our last show.
But we're still looking for James Brandon Brock, who is 22 years old. He's wanted for violation of probation on the original charge of carrying a concealed firearm.
I've got another person that we've found. Jermarcus Antonio Hall's been located as well.
Next up is Hastel Michael Thacker II, who's 36 years old. He's wanted for violation of probation on the original charge of battery on an officer or firefighter last known to live up in Crestview.
Call 863-TIPS if you know where to find Mark Stephen Hansford. He's 59, and Hansford's wanted for altering a bank bill or note and theft as well.
And the Walton County Sheriff's Office is looking for 26-year-old Carlos Urbina Suarez. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And he's wanted for larceny and burglary.
Katina Moore is wanted for violating probation for a grand theft charge. She's 32 years old, so if you know where to locate her, just give us a call, text us, or EmeraldCoastCrimeStoppers.com.
28-year-old Brendan Tyler Spears, who's wanted for violation of probation on the original charge of burglary and grand theft of a firearm, last known to live in Niceville.
And here is our third located since last show in this list. Robert Clay Oglesby has been found.
But we're still looking for Buck Rogers, who's wanted by the Walton County Sheriff's Office on numerous fraud charges.
Also still looking for Angela Fitzgerald. She's 36 and she's wanted for grand theft uttering a forged instrument, and forging a bank check. Now, looking back at 2013, Sheriff Larry Ashley said there are a number of significant achievements that stand out for the Sheriff's Office. And then, of course, there are some challenges that will need to be confronted in 2014. So we're going to hear from him. From your perspective, what would be the single biggest accomplishment or biggest issue that you tackled and succeeded at in 2013?
Oh, that's a difficult question to try to summarize the whole year and what was our most significant accomplishment. Certainly school resource officers and the ability to implement that school resource officer program and expand upon it using and reallocating sources that we have. We didn't create any new positions. We took what we had and we put school resource officers in every one of our public schools. And it's just not for the crazed gunman or madman that may come in and try to harm our children, but the function that they provide is not just security, but it's tracking sex offenders, it's investigating child crimes, it's enforcing court orders on custody issues and domestic violence issues. Because our schools are just microcosms of our society, and everything that we experience in society, they experience in schools. And so, if we've got one of the lowest officer per 1,000 ratios in the country, in the entire state of Florida. And so if I've got to put one officer per 1,000 people, or 1.4 officers, then it needs to be in those schools where those folks are the most likely to be victimized amongst all of us. Accreditation, we were reaccredited. Our evaluators, the Florida Accreditation Commission, said that we're a model agency. Now consider that we have one of the lowest per capita cost in the entire country. We're one of the lowest officer per 1,000 ratios in the entire country, that we keep getting asked to do more and more. Our call volume went up 13%. I mean, we've had record numbers of calls for service answered. Our population increased, our residential population increased 6%. Our tourist population increased 26%. So we had all these extra people and all these extra duties being heaped upon us while we've cut almost 20% from our budget. And this past budget season, they saw fit, our commissioners saw fit to give back some money. And so we took that 20% loss and made it a 14% loss. So we're moving in the right direction, but how do you serve a customer that doesn't necessarily understand your budget issues? Our citizens don't want to hear the sheriff say, hey, we can't afford to provide you security at the hospital for Baker Acts and mental health ward and Marchman Acts. They don't want to hear the sheriff say, hey, the court order visitation centers, we don't want to hear that you can't provide a deputy there. We don't want to hear that you can't provide a deputy when we call 911 for a traffic incident or for a burglary in progress. We don't want to hear that you don't have the investigators to prevent the sex crimes or investigate the sex crimes and child crimes. They don't want to hear that. So you have to be proactive in the whole budget process, because everything we do is we've got limited resources and we've got to prioritize how we use those resources. And again, I go back to the accomplishment this agency has made this year it's hard to summarize. We did so much more with so much less than our counterparts, our agencies of similar size and similar population. The number of arrests made, the number of civil, we served almost 17,000 pieces of civil service process. Subpoenas, writs of replevin, I mean, the list goes on the court documentations, because we are officers of the court as well.
And then a reduction in violent crime.
Reduction in violent crime, we had a 41% increase over the last 4 years. And this year, it's amazing that it comes on the heels of a budget increase, but we had a 10.6% reduction in violent crime. While the rest of the state of Florida was enjoying a 41-year low, our violent crime rose 41%. It's because we kept butchering our budget. There's a lot of challenges out there, but our folks have done everything above and beyond the call of duty. Their professionalism, meeting and rising to the challenge of the budget shortfalls. We're going to go for our national accreditation, which I think very few, if any, law enforcement agencies in Northwest Florida have accomplished that. Maybe the Tallahassee Police Department. But we think it's beneficial, especially when you're looking at the Department of Justice and grants and awarding grants. They want to look at those agencies that are not just their statewide accreditation, but nationally accredited as well. We establish those best practices, those best standards in law enforcement, and we adhere to them. And you have to, establish these proofs by whereas you're measured on what it is you do and how you do it, and if you're actually following your policy. And the state accreditation standards are 267 standards. The national accreditation standards are 400 plus. And so there'll certainly be a little added oversight, which is always good. And the purpose of accreditation is not to get a certificate to say you're accredited. The purpose is to actually be better, to be better managers, to be more fiscally responsible and accountable, but be accountable for those decisions you make and those operations that you run to our citizens, because they are the ultimate owners of the property. Over a third of our vehicles have over 150,000 miles on them. Now, capital is something that in these budget times that we have, versus sending additional deputies home, we've just not replaced vehicles. That is getting to a breaking point. We'll be asking for a great deal of capital this year to replace those aging vehicles. The last thing you want is to be calling for help and for a patrol officer to break down on the side of the road and not be able to get to you. I'm sure every police chief and sheriff out there believes that their people are the best people in the business. I believe that with all sincerity, and our folks show that time and time again, that this community and means a lot to them. It's not just about having a job, it's about serving and serving a cause greater than ourselves.
And now we've got some more individuals wanted by our local law enforcement agencies.
We need you to take a look at these mugs and contact Emerald Coast Crime Stoppers if you know where you can find any of these individuals who are again wanted as of today's taping date of February 24th. First up, Charles Keith Wallace. He's 27 and wanted for possession of a controlled substance without a prescription.
31-year-old Brittany Jo Wing, who's wanted for violation of probation for trafficking in stolen property, providing false information to a pawnbroker, and grand theft.
Trying to track down Christopher Allen Chance for fraud, burglary, and dealing in stolen property, last known to live in Fort Walton Beach.
And yet another one located since our last show, and that is Brandon Keshad Armstrong.
Mackenzie Perez Harris, also known as Polo, 24 years old. He's a suspect in a Crestview Police Department grand theft investigation.
And Geronimo Belan, who is wanted for failure to appear for felony DUI and driving while license suspended or revoked, last known to live in Walton County.
31-year-old Everett Hairston's wanted by the Walton County Sheriff's Office. Hairston's wanted for violating probation on a charge of grand theft auto.
And the Walton County Sheriff's Office is also looking for Emmanuel Uribe Martinez, who's wanted for violation of probation for resisting an officer with violence and loitering and prowling.
Eric Arsenault also violated probation. His charge was grand theft auto as well, last known to live in Walton County, and he's about 48 years old.
43-year-old Jerome Williams, who's wanted for violation of probation on the original charges of grand theft, giving a false name to law enforcement, and theft, last known to live over in Walton County.
James Andrew DeBovi's 24 years old. He's wanted for violating probation. His charge was burglary, theft charges, original charges of burglary, theft, and resisting arrest without violence. DuBovi was last known to live in Valparaiso.
And a familiar face to the show is Stephen Vance Cartwright, who's wanted by the Walton County Sheriff's Office for violation of probation for grand theft.
And here's a Niceville resident, there used to be at least, Brad Rodney Doty, 29 years old, trying to track him down for violating probation on charges of conspiracy to sell narcotics, possession of a controlled substance, and possession of drug paraphernalia.
And call 863-TIPS if you know where 27-year-old Jason Michael Oliver might be. He's wanted for violation of probation on the original charge of grand theft and uttering a forged check.
This is Stephen George Bostick. Bostick is wanted on fraud charges.
Next up is 47-year-old Melanie Renee Phillips. She's wanted for sale of cocaine, last known to live in Fort Walton Beach.
John Henry Bonner, 43, wanted by the Fort Walton Beach Police Department. Bonner's wanted for grand theft and violation of the Pawnbrokers Act.
Another familiar face is Daniel Wesley Arthur, who's wanted for felony neglect of an elderly person or disabled adult and possession of controlled substance by misrepresentation, fraud, forgery, or deception, and theft. That's a pretty long list. Last known to live in Fort Walton Beach.
Moving on to Andrew Aikman, who's wanted for larceny. Aikman's last known address was in Pensacola.
44-year-old Alexander Wise, who's wanted for violation of probation for grand theft and misdemeanor fraud, last known to live on McFarland Avenue over in Fort Walton Beach.
Cassius Conan Weathersby is wanting for uttering a forged instrument, 43 years old, last known address Fort Walton Beach.
26-year-old Samuel Edward Thomas III, who's wanted for violation of probation for providing false information to a pawnbroker and false information to law enforcement and grand theft, last known to live in Shalimar.
And our fifth and final located since last show, at least for this episode, is James Michael Stange.
And last but not least, we are still looking for 26-year-old Lonzel J. Knox, who's wanted for aggravated battery.
In today's world, of course, first responders have to always expect the unexpected, and that's why they train for a very wide range of scenarios.
That's right, and the partially vacant Shalimar Courthouse Annex has given them opportunities for some joint training they hope they never have to use.
Exercise only. Have an active shooter, 1250 North Eglinton Parkway. Truck 2, Medic 7, Medcom 3.
The scenario involved an active shooter coming into the courthouse and opening fire on anybody that he encountered, basically. As the shooter traveled through the hallways, he also ignited a fire in one of the courtrooms and then proceeded on to another courtroom and took hostages in that location. So we had the initial law enforcement response. They came in and engaged the shooter. And then we wanted to evaluate how fire rescue and EMS could treat the patients and rescue the patients with the shooter still being active in the building. One of the things coming down at the federal level and the national level is new response protocols to events like this. They want to see first responders getting in there quicker to deliver care to the injured. Well, the traditional model, fire and EMS stand back until law enforcement secures the scene. We all know in a situation like this, that could take hours. So we're looking at kind of a shift in the response. How can law enforcement set up a perimeter, secure the scene, secure the shooter, and create an area that's marginally safe for us to enter and start, rescuing the victims, providing care, triage, and everything that goes along with that. In real world, we'd have had a lot more resources on scene, so it definitely would have been more chaotic. And then, adding the stress of it being a real world situation would add to the chaos as well. But ultimately, we just try to acclimate everybody to that type of situation so that if they do encounter it, they're a little bit more prepared for it. There was more than one firefighter and more than one officer that came to me afterwards and said, I learned things out here and made mistakes that I will never make again the rest of my life. And that's what we want. We want people making their mistakes in a training environment, learning those hard lessons that will keep them from making the same mistakes in the real world.
Now we want to tell you about some upcoming events. Both I think are in April. The first one, the Emerald Coast Motorcycle Challenge Rodeo and Skills Training, is scheduled for April 10th through the 12th at the Boardwalk on Okaloosa Island. Now this is going to be hosted by the Emerald Coast Blue Knights, and the rodeo features various motorcycle challenges that test a rider's skills and abilities, and they're going to award prizes to the best riders. It's open to all motorcyclists, and that'll include motor officers, civilian expert, and civilian advanced, but the motorcycles have to be equipped from the factory and at least 1,000 cc's. You're going to be able to go to emeraldcoastchallenge.com, get all the information you need about that upcoming event. There's going to be a practice day on April 10th, the competition the 11th through the 12th, and the great thing about this event is the registration fee, which is $45 per competitor. A lot of the proceeds from that are going to the Emerald Coast Children's Advocacy Center. So this is in essence a great fundraiser that helps save and heal child abuse victims from both Okaloosa and Walton counties. And in fact, that center, the CAC, served 729 kids in 2012, the last numbers we have right now.
And speaking of fundraisers, we have our annual crawfish boil supporting Emerald Coast Crime Stoppers coming up. And just like last year, we're going to have two events this year. The first one's going to be April 26th. And we're actually going to be participating in the Marvel of Flight event that they're going to have at the Defuniak Springs Airport. So come out and check us out. I think the gates open at like 8 a.m. We'll be serving crawfish. Like we normally do at our booth, and of course they've got, I think, some free helicopter rides and all sorts of fun things for the kids to do. It's a free event for you to come out to, and of course you can purchase the crawfish. All the proceeds go to Emerald Coast Crime Stoppers. And then our 5th annual Fort Walton Beach Crawfish Boil is going to be May 10th at Uptown Station. Probably start selling the crawfish at about 11 o'clock, but we're looking for sponsors right now. So visit emeraldcoastcrimestoppers.com and look at all the information. We have several sponsorship letters, but it's lots of fun. You get your name out there. Of course, you get your mention on the Crime Stoppers TV show, as well as all of our social media. and any of our printed materials. So, and it's a lot of fun. If you've ever been to one of our crawfish boils, you know we give very generous portions, and they're fabulous. The guy that comes and cooks them is from Louisiana.
There's usually a line winding around for people to get
And
there
that's
early.
May 10th, so make sure you come on out and get some mud bugs.
And keep in mind that, of course, Crime Stoppers runs on private donations, so all of the
right.
public assistance is critical to the program. It is all driven by those donations. And that is going to take us to the end of this month's show.
And thanks so much for joining us and for supporting Emerald Coast Crime Stoppers.